In this episode, we are going to be reviewing Angel Face, the film noir from 1953. This was directed by Otto Preminger, and it starred Robert Mitchum and Gene Simmons. Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a podcast where I explore movies from all over the world with various guests and talk about how those films were told on screen. Today, I have a very special guest, Steve Norden. He has worked as a youth and community minister for almost 20 years, and he's a Toronto-based writer and podcaster for screenfish.net. Steve, welcome. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks so much. I'm excited. This is going to be a lot of fun. Thanks, Rob.
No, my pleasure. Tell me a little bit about Screenfish. What is Screenfish about?
Well, Screenfish began, I guess now it'd be almost 7 years ago. And one of the things, what we're passionate about is talking about film, but trying to get at their cultural relevance, what they're saying. So, I mean, it's a lot of fun. I'm not just interested in whether or not a film is good. I always talk about whether or not I think a film is good, but I really like to get behind that and sort of say, what is the film really trying to say?
Right.
And engage it at that level, because, you know this, I know this, every movie has a story. So what is that story and why are we telling it now? And that's been really exciting for us to do. So we try and skew our reviews a little bit differently. And, we talk about all the stuff everybody else does, but we also want to talk about what it means to us,
and the element of faith that runs through. How do you tie that into your reviews? Is there something that you're looking for within the films, or something you want to highlight in regards to religion or faith?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, the truth is, I think it works on any number of levels. Like, the basic premise is, if everything has a message, then everything wants to start a conversation. That's my argument.
Right.
So, and whatever that is, I'm not interested in just saying, okay, from a faith-based perspective, there are some people who say, is this good from a faith-based perspective? That's not really what I'm interested in. But I mean, as you said, as a pastor, as a minister, I have my own sort of worldviews that come through my faith, and I like to engage the film from that perspective. What are the things in a film or a story that maybe we haven't addressed, or the sort of conversations that spark from it? I just wrote a review on Disenchantment, the Netflix show, or whatever it was, and just looked at it from the idea of digging up the past and from this particular season, because I think everything, and if anything is trying to say something, then you can address it from a perspective of faith, but it's not always limited to that. I mean, our conversations on our podcast as well, we have people of faith, not of faith, everybody just sort of coming in and meeting in the middle with the arts in that as that place where we can discuss.
The film noir has such a broad definition from so many different people, and I'm curious how you see film noir.
Well, I love film noir. I am a sucker. I am a sucker for the genre, and obviously this falls in later in the classic era, but we still see it. We still see it now. We see it all, those trappings all the way through. I'm always interested about characters that have two sides and try and reconcile those things. So, in a character like Diane in this particular film, I mean, she is not the prototypical femme fatale.
Right.
There's a bit of a redemption arc, and yet not. Yes. Like, there's a push and pull with her in that darkness within this film. And I think on that level, I'm like, see, this is the type of stuff that I love to talk about, because I'm like, that's a really interesting exploration of the human condition. And I think film noir at the time when it came from, it really took off. I mean, people are trying to figure out the world again after the war. What makes sense now? We've just done this to each other, nation against nation. And what drives us to that? Exactly. And I think that's what's so key, so interesting about film noir, especially. I would be interested to know if film noir we'll see a little bit of a resurrection of it post-pandemic, because again, we've got this sort of global phenomenon of darkness, less intentional. Like it's not like somebody did this, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I took, that's a really, really good point. You mentioned, yeah, Diane certainly is like this character who's done a lot wrong and realizes it, and in her own way tries to fix it, but it doesn't really quite work out well. What do you think the essence of this story is? Do you think it really revolves around her character more than Mitchum, or what do you think the message here is?
I've been wrestling with that since I said this was my first time seeing this film. I had
Me
not
too.
seen. Yeah. Oh, you hadn't seen it either.
No,
Okay.
I hadn't.
Okay. Yeah, because I loved it. I thought it was great.
And
I mean, so much about this film. Like, you're asking about what the core of it is. That's an interesting question, because I almost feel like it's not like it. It feels like it should be the relationship between Frank and Diane, but I don't feel like it is. I feel like I don't think Frank is a dupe. I don't think but he's certainly sort of caught up in this tidal wave
yeah.
that's going on, and he just keeps getting, just when they think I'm out, I'm pulling me back in. As the quote is. But there's a toxicity to both of them as well. Like he's no saint.
No, not at all.
He's an awful guy.
Yeah.
He just happens to be innocent in this matter.
Right.
Which I think is really interesting. So, I mean, if you're asking me what the center is, I really think it's the relationship between Diane and her dad, and her mother. Like that trio is the thing that I think drives so much of the film. Her dad actually strikes me as more of a dupe than Frank. Like I was sitting there getting so frustrated with him as I was watching.
What was it about him that made you feel that way?
Of all the characters, he had the least, point isn't the word, least impact. And he felt like, and everything you hear about, they sort of describe him, he was a person of impact. And then,
that's right. Yeah.
And now he's sitting there apologizing for overspending his allowance. And it's sort of like, oh, dude, like, come on.
That's a good point. That's interesting, because that didn't really dawn on me, but she spoke so highly of him, particularly after the trial ended and her and Mitchum get off. She spoke so highly of him, but yet he didn't come across as someone who people would really, really admire. And then, on the flip side to that was that the stepmother, Gene Simmons, is also describing her as like someone so evil. And there's nothing about her that you see in the movie that shows that. So it's interesting, these perceptions that Diane had of people, which, again, falls into the noir category of like the not very trustworthy protagonist, So you don't really know, like, she's living in her own head. She sees, people do that in life all the time. You can hear that something happened to a loved one, and you make these assumptions in your mind as to why that is, but you really don't know. There's only possibilities. And we have to really just go on what she says. But as you said, I hadn't really thought of it in terms of the father, but that's true. Those people are not behaving in the way in which she describes.
Yeah, it's true. I love that you use the term perceptions. Again, very film noir, this sort of what's really going on. But this is one of those cases where perception is reality.
Right.
Like,
yeah, it's not like some nightmarish expressionistic scene, and like it's like depicting it as a nightmare. Like it's told in very straight, reality, a sense of reality within the storytelling. He's not making you feel that he wasn't really using a lot of the expressionism as much as you see in other film noirs.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And you watch this, and now I'm in doing my reading, or I've done a little just online searches and stuff. I'm hearing about the relationship between Preminger and Simmons was pretty complicated, but he does her no favors other than the fact that she's a sort of complicated character, because she's complaining about her mother. Yearning is the wrong term, but I mean, she certainly wants to see her father better.
Right.
But there's nothing to go on. Meanwhile, you have these other characters, and you've got a character like Frank, who is literally playing two women at the same time.
Right.
And feels nothing, and he's almost more heroic than she is in this film. And I'm like, hold on, man, like, wait a second.
You certainly feel, I mean, you feel for her to an extent, but you feel much more for him, because he just gets totally lost in her world. And what's interesting is that the sort of cliche, not in a bad way, like in the good sense of the cliches of the femme fatale and the doomed protagonist, we certainly have that, but it's from a different angle. It's a more complicated angle. I mean, she's not just seducing him for money, even though it seems that way at first. And in order, like, you feel that she's trying to get her mother-in-law's money, and then you feel as though, well, I shouldn't, actually not really, because as we know, usually the doomed protagonist is in it purely for the woman, because he's so in love and aroused by the woman, and also money is usually a part of it as well. But in this case, you don't really know how he felt about her, but he could see that he could get things from her, because he was like this guy who was he was working as an ambulance driver when they meet, but he had these dreams to start a garage with a sports car. And, she was going to help him more than anyone else could. I mean, him and his girlfriend were like working class people. They were saving for it, but she was rich, had all this money that she could invest in him. She could get him a job working as a chauffeur so that he could, build up her sports car and race it in an upcoming race. So it's not just so cut and dry, like, I want money and the woman wants money and the guy wants sex. It's much more complicated than that, which I thought was really, really fascinating. I don't know if though, I'm sure they did, but I was curious if that stood out to you, just in how he was sort of taking it from a different angle.
Well, I actually was intrigued by the fact that this was 1953. So one of the things I wondered is, as a more later entry into the golden age of the genre, maybe they were starting to play with those tropes, like this Kiss Me Deadly, I think, was that 55. I don't know if you've seen Kiss Me Deadly.
Yeah, it is 55. Yeah.
55. So Kiss Me Deadly was like, it starts off and it's straight up film noir all the way through, and then turns into almost like sci-fi at the end, and it's just nuts. And but at this point, I'm wondering how much they were like, okay, well, we've been doing this for a while, we got to play with this a little bit differently, in order to keep it interesting, because we've been doing it so much the same way for the last 7 or 8 years.
It makes you wonder, because I know that apparently, like, Howard Hughes I'm sure you read, I'm not sure if you read this, but gave the script to Preminger, and Preminger hated it. So and he rewrote a lot of it. So I imagine if maybe the original script was more cut and dry, I don't know. But I mean, Preminger was such a great filmmaker. I'm sure that he had a lot to do with how he sort of took this from a different angle and made it more complicated,
Yeah, that's interesting. There's a scene that stuck out to me too. Like, again, this is 53. We're approaching the 60s, but you have the slap in the face of snap out of it, and then where you see Frank slap Diane, which again was very much of that toxic toxic masculinity from that genre, and she smacks him right back.
Yeah. I love that.
It was really interesting. And I thought, and it wasn't, it was just sort of like, well, we're going to be even keel, slap for slap on that. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, they really were. Yeah, they really were equals in that sense. And apparently I read that Preminger had he had Mitchum do it so many times
Yeah.
And then Mitchum was like, "Is this how you wanted it?" He slapped Preminger because he was so sick of doing all these takes. And I thought, oh my God, that's like, I mean, wow, slapping the director in the face to the point where Preminger wanted to replace him. I just thought, oh my God. But this film certainly had its share of like film noir stories within itself.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure you read Gene Simmons hated Howard Hughes, who was the producer.
That was it. It wasn't Preminger. It was Hughes I was talking about. You're right. Yeah.
And cut off her hair so she couldn't use him because she knew that he only liked women with long hair. Like he was a real kind of like when he took over RKO, he said he wanted to do movies about like guns and fornicating, and that was it, right? So so he was a sort of a macho guy, and a big part of the reason he wanted to do this was to get even with her, just put that wig on her. And when I was watching the film, I thought her hair didn't look very good. I thought her hair looks a little strange. And sure enough, yeah, it's because it was a wig. So he put a wig on her and said, "No, you're under contract. You have to do it." And I thought, oh my God, how do you even make anything good come from that and then the Mitchum slapping the director? But there was enough there was enough angst and conflict that it turned into quite a film, you know.
Hey, maybe that sort of helped in this. I don't know. I can't even imagine.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's pretty
where
crazy.
we are. I can't even imagine even being on a film set for a lot of times in the 1940s and 50s.
Oh my God,
it was nuts. It was nuts.
Yeah, I mean, the stories you hear are like, wow. They would be making headlines today, that's for sure.
Can I say, just to completely swerve to the left, really happy to see Jim Backus. I thought
was he
Jim
someone
Backus? No, he was the district attorney. He was Thurston Howell III from Gilligan's Island.
Oh, you know what? I thought he looked so familiar. I wrote down his name because I thought, where is it here? Oh no, I'm thinking of their attorney, who was Leon Ames. So you're talking about
the prosecutor, and all I could think of was him. I just wanted him to say, "Lovey, I want you. If you're going to take the 50 million, you know."
I was thinking of him because he was also James Dean's father in Rebel Without a Cause.
Yes, he was.
That's what as soon as I saw him, I was like, I know him from somewhere. So you're right. It's between those two for sure. Another thing I wanted to point out that what's interesting about the first half of the film is that he's making the writers and Preminger are certainly making it obvious that Diane is trying to kill her stepmother and that she wants to get Mitchum basically as an accomplice. Like they don't hide that fact. And what's interesting here is that the characters all see through it. I mean, even she's kind of his girlfriend. I mean, he says he's a free agent, so I guess he won't commit to the relationship with Mary. And even she sees through it. I mean, she, meets, Gene Simmons calls her and says, "Let's meet for lunch. Oh, I want to invest in your boyfriend in this garage she wants to start. Oh, by the way, we had dinner last night." And she's like, "Okay, like obviously you're trying to come between us." Like the characters were not stupid. So in that sense, Gene Simmons is not like the typical, like really calculated and clever femme fatale. Like she's like not the best femme fatale. Like she's okay at it.
Yeah.
I mean, she certainly gets Mitchum to like enough that she was able to get him working there, to start a relationship with him. But at the point when he knows that she's trying to kill the stepmother, this is what's interesting, is that, she's convinced that the stepmother's trying to kill her. She says that she's putting the gas on. And then right after that is when she convinces him, "Let's run away together." And let's just stay a few more days. And that's when, she does something to the car so that as soon as the mother-in-law went in the car, she would go in reverse and fall off the cliff. And clearly would pin it on who's the guy who knows about cars, the chauffeur. So I'm curious, did you feel that the whole time she was just trying to pin it on him? Or do you think she was trying to make him a collaborator, but then when he was going to walk out, she's like, "I'm just going to pin it on him"? I was wondering if that popped out to you.
You mean from the beginning? from the very beginning.
Yeah, because it's not so clear. It's clear that she's trying to kill the mother-in-law, but you feel like is she trying to just get Mitchum in on it because she's just feeding him with hatred about the mother-in-law, and makes you wonder. Like she makes up the story about the meeting with the lawyer. Like she says that she's not going to want to invest in the business. She's just lying. And then later on, when he sees through that, then she has this idea to run away. So I wonder if it was more that she was trying to work with him on it, and then when that didn't work, she was like, I'm just gonna pin it on him. I was curious what you thought.
No, that's interesting. Yeah, I sort of assumed that she was trying to get him in on it, at least to help her, not because she couldn't, but because she didn't want to do it alone. I mean, certainly the death of the father was collateral damage, if you will.
Yeah,
it was all about the mother. I did get the sense that, yet again, like there's several moments in this movie where she is trying to lure him in, and he spurns her. Whatever context you want to put that in, whether it's relational, whether it's the murder, whether that. So I feel like there were moments where she was trying to bring him in for help, but the moment she tosses the carton of cigarettes down the hill,
right,
it's like I'm taking her down, and I'm taking you with him, you with her.
exactly.
And I feel like there's that vengefulness, which is what makes her so interesting to me, because there's this, again, that's typical femme fatale. Let's go.
Right.
I'm gonna get my way. But then after the death of her father, like there's a genuine like repentance there.
That was what was so great, because it's not just someone till the very end of the story is still so calculated and has no feelings for anyone. Like she didn't know the father would be in the car, so the father was everything to her, and that's when she was like, oh my god, what have I done? And right away, even in the hospital, when she's hospitalized, says, Frank didn't do anything, I did it. And it's really the lawyer, he was sort of he made me laugh, because he's doing his job, and he's like, no, I can get you off, and this whole plan to make sure that there's sympathy towards them, that they were in love, and he does he does create enough doubt in the jury that it could have been someone else who fumbled with the car, that he manages to get them off. But what's so fascinating is that then you see the last 20 minutes of the film where they go home. I think it's just over 20 minutes, and you think, what's next? Because you feel like that would have just been the end of the film. But no, now they're married. They were forced to elope to gain sympathy, and now they're together. But just jumping back on Mitchum, you brought something up earlier, which is true. Like Mitchum is totally flawed as well. Like he's leading this poor woman on, Mary. He won't commit to her. And at the same time, he's lying to her on the phone. Early on, he says, "Oh, I'm just tired," but really it's because he goes out with Jane Simmons, who played Diane. And then he even knows that she was trying to kill the mother-in-law. And when she says, "Let's run away," he's like, "Okay," even though at that point earlier he was sort of repulsed by it, and he was going to leave. And then he's like, okay, so he, I don't know whether he had some feelings for her. He was conflicted. I don't know what you thought in that instance.
I couldn't figure out what Frank was feeling at any moment, at any time. Robert Mitchum was stone-faced through the entire film. And I'm like, look, he's got the movie star job, but I don't think he moved it the entire time.
Well, he's such an interesting actor in that way, because he often was criticized for sleepwalking through his roles. But then when you watch them, it's because everything is so subtle. Yeah. And he plays everything as if he's not bothered, but you can just sense enough of it that he is by what's going on. And clearly, yeah, you're right. It makes it more interesting because you don't really know how he feels about this woman, even when she asks him after, when he's gonna, divorce her when they get off. And she's like, did you ever really love me? And he's like, I don't know. He says something.
I think he says
maybe in a way.
It's a kind of love or something like bizarre.
It's a kind of love, and the ego on him too. And when she's like, well, what are you gonna do? Go back to Mary? And he's like, yeah. And she's like, well, she won't go back with you. And he's like, you want to bet? Like, I was like, how can you be that egotistic to think that this woman was going to take you back after you strung her on? We're on a murder trial. But he's just like, watch me, and yeah, but you're right. I mean, that's what I love about film noir and movies in general, where there's no clear protagonist and clear antagonist. It's pure shades of gray. It just shows that they were both very flawed.
I will say this too. You hit something there with when we're talking about Frank. I could not figure out what love is defined to anyone in this film, and if anybody understood what it was, because for Diane it was obsessive, for Frank it was a tool, and for maybe for his mother, maybe for her mother, she sort of understood it because she's not the evil stepmother.
Right.
The father sort of falls apart in the middle of a relationship. The arguable one for me would be Mary, because Mary by the end of the film is arguably the strongest, has the strongest code.
Yeah.
Finally. Even she, like, I actually thought to myself, is this the first open relationship I've ever seen in an old black and white film? Because both of them, we're not exclusive. You can't be mad. Oh, I know, and I'm not. I'm like, whoa.
I was surprised about that too. That's true. I thought for the 50s, that was pretty. You didn't see that. I mean, as you know, movies in the 50s, a married couple, you couldn't even show them in bed. You had to have the two separate beds. So to see like a couple not committed, mainly from his side of things, because he didn't want to commit, I was surprised they got that through the censors.
But even she pivots to the friend immediately.
Yeah.
She's like, well, and I figured there would be this scene where she's angry and saying, how can you do this? But she just sort of says, well, you'll do. I was like, hold on. But that was one of the things I thought in the film. I thought so many, you've got people here that are using the term love, but I don't know if any of them really understood what it meant.
That's a good point. That's a really, really interesting point. And it really makes me think of Mary, because Mary says that when her mother died, her father, she's like, she's the right out of classic literature, the daughter whose mother died, and all she has is the father, and the father is everything to her. And then the stepmother comes in, and it's, daggers, like, how dare you now try to replace my mother? So in a way, I thought that speech was interesting, because it shows that she almost died when her mother died. Like, she's almost that innocent. And I don't know about you, but I've known some people who have lost parents at a very early age, and there's always this sense of something that died within them. And I think that with Diane, it was as if she just couldn't grow up. She couldn't get over it, to the fact that even when she's alone in the house and she goes to where Mitchum was sleeping, and some of his clothes are still there, she's trying on his clothes. And I don't think it was out of love. I think it was really because she needed she felt that she needed someone to protect her, take care of her, just like a kid would. I don't know if that's how you felt about that.
Well, that's what I thought was so interesting about Diane, is because she has those moments, but then she doesn't. Like, well, that makes no sense. But I mean, she has these moments where she's clearly looking for somebody else to fill a void. Right. But then there's other moments where she desperately wants to be, no pun intended, in the driver's seat.
Right.
Right. There is a strong indication from her that she's looking for something to be made whole, whether it's another person or something. I love your point there. There's something missing. There's a deep-seated pain. I've heard the term Oedipal complex in this movie. I see it.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
But then there are these moments, like she goes, okay, my favorite scene in the film is when she goes and has dinner with Mary.
Yeah.
It's one of those times where I'm sitting there, I'm like, what's
You do
happening?
it.
There is
Yeah.
some serious gall here
Yeah. Yeah. That again, that
to
just speaks to her innocence, right? And just like, how could she not have known that an adult, and of course, she's like, it's almost like a kid, like what a kid would think
Mhm.
or do. And of course, these people were smart enough that they could just see right through her, and they do. I mean, that's what was really, as opposed to other film noirs where often they don't until the very last minute, then they see through it.
Yeah,
So
it's so true. So there was a complexity there that I thought was really interesting, and that's her performance in this film. Gene Simmons is just wonderful.
she was really good, and I don't believe I've seen her in other noirs. I mean, I always think of her. I don't know her too well. I remember the one she did with Paul Newman. I think it was called Until They Sail. I quite like that film, but I don't know her. She has such an innocent look about her, which works with the innocence of the character. But I thought even when she would, those moments when she was alone, like playing the piano, or even when she throws the cigarettes down the cliff, that's, of course, again, like they're making the audience know what she's doing intentionally. But the looks on her faces were just pure, I don't want to say evil, but just that cold, just like she's totally up to something. So perhaps all that was going on the set, in a combination of her acting approach, but I thought she was quite good as well.
Yeah, that wasn't acting. She was that they just let the camera roll a little too long.
Just look what Howard Hughes over here. Wow.
Howard didn't drive home that night. He was a little concerned.
And just I'm not too familiar with the character who was the lawyer, but I thought he was what's his name here, Leon Ames. I just thought he had the slickness and the pep, the total confidence. I just thought he was, and as he tells her later, when she, says, I want to just admit that I did this even after they get off, and he says, well, you can't because you've already been cleared from the crime. And what's interesting is that what he says to her is like, if you keep doing this, they're going to put you in a mental institution. So she had a choice really to either just go on with her life, or possibly maybe she clearly needed help, some kind of therapy, some kind of, talk to a psychiatrist or something, and see what's get to the heart of what's wrong, or go to jail, or kill herself. And she ultimately chooses to not only kill herself but Mitchum, which I thought was an interesting choice, and it really spoke to the time of how they viewed mental health too. It's like, well, I can't be seen as crazy, and then what does she do? It's like she does something much worse, which is just kill him and kill myself. I don't know if those choices popped out to you, like that she has at the end there.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's interesting to me to look back on older films and try and see the conversations that we're having now about those things. Like you said, mental health in this film is a major theme.
Right. Right.
And what is it done? It's dismissed, it's locked down. That scene with the lawyer is like such a great noir, typical noir scene. And because it's all about locking things down, locking down the truth. Like, here you've got somebody who says, write it down. I want everyone to know. That's great. You wrote it down.
Yeah.
No one cares. No one cares.
Because it's over.
Yeah, it's done. It's over. And if you tell anyone, you're gonna get up into an institution, throws more shame on her. And she's trying to free herself, free her conscience, let everyone know that Frank is innocent. And then and she's dismissed.
Yeah.
She's dismissed for whatever reason. It's just sort of like whether he doesn't want to deal with it, whether he doesn't want to do the paperwork, whether he seems interested. Hey, that's a great story, but don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone that. And certainly mental health in this film is just seen as I mean, it's just toxic. It's
Yeah.
just sort of like, don't talk about that either.
Well,
You know?
it's interesting because she would take like jail or the electric chair over going to an institution
Yeah.
now. But you brought up a good point, possibly because maybe she felt that's what she deserved, or as you said, to get it off her chest and to admit her guilt. And in an institution, she couldn't admit her guilt. They would have just kept saying you're crazy over and over again. Again, that was the perception at that time. I'm not saying that's
Yeah.
necessarily what they would have done in an institution, but that's how generally the public just viewed it. And I was really fascinated by that, and the fact that she took that there was obviously enough vendetta in her to also take Mitchum with her, because she was at this point gonna try to say that he was innocent, but then in the end I think it's because it goes back to this whatever. Obviously there's violence in her, right, and there's murder in her, and so she felt crossed by him, and so you're gonna cross me, I'm gonna take you with me. So that was really interesting. I mean, they could have chose to just have her do that on her own, just kill herself, but it's interesting they did chose to have Mitchum be in that car, and she intentionally killed them both. Any idea why? Do you think she did that out of a vendetta against him for wanting to leave?
I've been thinking about that. One of the reviews I wrote talked or said that it was a trope of if I can't have you, no one can. I don't think it's that simple.
I
Like
don't
maybe
think
it
so
is,
either. Yeah, I don't.
but
Yeah,
it didn't feel like that. This didn't feel like he wasn't even going back to Mary. She knew that Mary hadn't taken him back.
right.
He was going to go party in Mexico.
Yeah.
This guy's the worst. I'm like he's the worst. But like the fact that she does it, and can I say those car crashes are spectacular and really
Wow.
disturbing.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, you can see the bodies throughout the whole
yes.
time. It makes me wonder how did they? I guess they just put some really good look, like realistic dummies in there or something. But you're right. It looked really realistic.
Yeah, I was thinking back. I'm like, sure, okay, we've seen cars blow up, we've seen this stuff before. That was just brutal.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
make you watch it. It's like
Yeah.
I was like, man, this is
That's a
nuts.
good point. I forgot how much I also was shocked by. They really went in close. It wasn't some like wide shot that you normally saw, or just some big explosion. It was like you see it going down and down, and the bodies flipping over and over. I thought, man, wow,
Yeah, they really, really stick it to them. It's like,
absolutely.
oh my gosh. So I mean, for that sort of finale, it doesn't strike me as if I can't have it, if I can't have you, no one can. It's too over the top. And again, I've been wrestling with that too. Like, is it just revenge? Is it, is it have something to do with the fact that yes, is it another form of betrayal? Not on her. Does she feel it's another form of betrayal on his start? Like, okay, well, we've cleared the decks. Now we can move forward.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to land on that because that final car crash is funny. I read before I saw the film, I read it and it was like, okay, the shocking finale. And every time you say the shocking finale, you're like, okay, sure. It's not going to be shocking. I thought the shocking finale was the scene with the lawyer. I figured this was the shocking finale. And then it was like, we're going to flip them over the edge of a cliff. And I was like, hold on. I actually was surprised. I was like, hold on.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was too. I think it's that's what I love so much about certain films that I can go back to and see so many possibilities. That the meanings are not static. It's not just a clear. And I know people often want to attach clear meanings, clear messages, but I like when things are not so cut and dry. Like, we can talk about how these people felt about each other all day. We could talk about why Gene Simmons at the end killed both of them. And no one's answer would be absolute. I mean, my interpretation can change on my next viewing. I could see something else. That's the beauty of really good art. And it's like people, when they're really about, you know, the people, and to successfully do that within like a crime where a story where sometimes, you know, often crime stories are very plot driven. So
Mhm.
it's just, you know, very this event led to this event and this event. So what's so ambiguous about that? But people are always ambiguous, you know. In this case, it was so much more about what's behind these choices and these feelings. It's not so clear, you know. In a way it just made me think, I wonder if, you know, she knew she was going to die, and it's like she needed a protection even after death. So I'll bring Frank with me. It's like protection in the afterlife, so to speak. You know, some symbolic way of symbolic means to die, like if she couldn't live without someone and she can't die without someone, who knows, you know. But I thought it was perfect. I thought that was, you know, there you got the doom protagonist, and it's got every film noir trope, but a totally different angle and much more complex, for sure.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I hadn't thought of it that way. Like, she could have just killed him.
For
Um,
sure, for sure.
but you're there within her character. There is that sort of need to have someone near, whether it's her father, whether it's him,
Yeah,
her mother. You know,
yeah,
there is a sort, almost a, well, duality isn't quite the word because it suggests only two people, but this need for a duality of some type,
yes,
which I think is really, really interesting in this case. And you know, I love what you said before too, because I mean, this is not talking about what we're doing, what Screenfish is doing, but that's exactly what I was saying before. You know, there's this idea that you can look at a film and see it totally different ways,
yes,
and there's
absolutely.
that space for conversation. Like this film, you know, what did Preminger actually mean by that finale? We don't know. We're not
Yeah,
going to
he
find out.
might not know, you know. He may have some different ideas, but he may not. That's what's so interesting, is that often people think that directors, if they made it, then they must know, but not necessarily. They are intentionally including you to make
Yeah.
your own interpretations. Otherwise, it's just, you know, it's just. I mean, there's nothing wrong with something that is very simple, I think sometimes, but in this case, maybe he had his own ideas, certainly, but that's what I really liked about it. And I'm surprised that this is not. Well, I don't know how known this is. It's not something I hear about in the noir conversation. I'm not really sure, because I'd only heard of it in the last few months. I had never heard of it before. I don't know about you.
No, I hadn't. When we were
Yeah,
first discussing what films to do, I sent, you know, you sent me a list of things. What would you? I sent you the ones I hadn't seen because I was like, you know, I'd be in for any of these. But in the noir conversation, this isn't. You don't hear people talk about Angel Face like you do Double Indemnity, or
I
Touch
know.
of Evil. You know, you
Yeah,
just, it's sort of in there. And but again, looking back, I guess it's more known than I thought it was, because there are some people. It seems like it's gained more popularity
oh,
as time goes by.
certainly.
But it's possible it's just at one of these times. Maybe it was just a lot of, like I said, this was a really popular genre for those years. People were beginning to move on. You know, at this point, maybe that's why. I don't know, but it's fabulous.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Was there any final thoughts that you wanted to share on this film?
No, not really. I love the staging. I thought the staging was gorgeous for this, but I love the staging of all film noir. I really,
Yeah,
really
this
do.
of course being LA, you know, and that goes to
Yeah.
Sunset Boulevard. It goes to all the Double Indemnity and many noirs. Yeah, I always love that. But you know, this has less of a. Those ones have more of a. I don't want to say flashy, but kind of an obvious LA. Whereas this seemed very secluded where they were. You know, I
Hmm.
don't know if you know. I just thought that was interesting. It was like they were just totally alone in this huge mansion. It kind of looked like LA. They reference LA, so you know, but it felt even more secluded than Sunset Boulevard to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I felt like it was a lavish prison. You
Exactly. It
know,
was less
so many,
stylized.
yeah, so much. And it is a lonely, empty house.
Yes.
Even though it has 5 people living in it. It is lonely, it is empty, and it is just it's just one. I thought it was beautiful to see. I loved it.
Yeah, no, me too. Absolutely. Where is the best place for people to find Screenfish? I know that it's also a podcast format and your reviews. Where's the best place for people to find you?
Well, I mean, you can check out the website, which is screenfish.net, which has all sorts of reviews. We cover everything.
I know I saw. Yeah, you guys do. I mean, wow, it's amazing. You do literally everything coming out, which is great.
Well, okay, everything is maybe I should dial that word back a little bit.
Sorry, I'm sort of exaggerating the word everything, but a lot. Let's
covering everything. No, but we've got a great team of people that are always on the lookout for things that are interesting to them and that they want to wrestle with and ask questions about and grapple with as well. So you can find us at screenfish.net. You can find us wherever podcasts are available. We are on Google Play, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of these things. And you can find us on YouTube. Look up Screenfish on YouTube. And in both of those cases, we've got not just Screenfish Radio, which is our weekly podcast, where we do this, break down the films and deal and wrestle with the issues. But we have lots of interviews as well with industry professionals, people that want to talk about their work as well.
Fantastic. Great. Well, I'll leave the link in the description box below for where people can get in touch with Steve and check out screenfish.net. Steve, thanks so much. Thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, anytime. Thank you so much, Robert. I really appreciate it. This has been fun.
Yeah, please come again. My pleasure.
All right.
Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I want to thank all of my Patreon members. If you enjoy my work here on YouTube or on the audio version of my podcast, please consider supporting me over on Patreon. Head over to patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies for full details. Patreon is bonus content that I create month in and month out, and it is based on polls that you vote on that I create at the beginning of every month. And so therefore you will be very much a part of the decision making as to what I record on my Patreon month in and month out. So head over to the link for full details. And if you are currently listening to this on the audio version of the podcast and you've run out of episodes to listen to, head over to YouTube, where every single episode I've ever recorded can be found, youtube.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies. And lastly, if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing to my channel by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movies logo. You will see it floating above my head right here to your top left in just a second. Just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new videos or when I go live. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you in the next episode.